Hello, everyone, or no one, or whoever's watching this, or maybe just the ether that I'm sending these thoughts out into. I really just wanted to put all my thoughts on Endwalker out into the universe, and if anyone wants to talk about them, I love discussing things, so feel free to comment if you disagree, if you agree. But I just wanted to put my thoughts out there, and I'm too lazy to type, and I have no expectation that anyone will actually watch this, but I just wanted to, like I said, kind of put my thoughts out there. So I have been playing Final Fantasy XIV since open beta. I know there are some people who will gatekeep and say that they've played since 1.0, but all I'm saying is I have played this game for a long time. I've put a lot of my life into this game, a lot of my heart into this game. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. I run a really large free company on Cactar server, so I really care about Final Fantasy XIV, is what I'm saying. And I've cared about it for a while. So I was, of course, like everyone else, very excited for Endwalker, the big conclusion, the big finale to the story they've been working towards for 10 years. And I have to say, I'm really, really disappointed. And that actually makes me kind of sad. I'm really sad, actually. The expansion obviously tackled a lot of themes of depression, but it ended up kind of making me depressed because of reasons that I don't think they intended. Instead of being depressed because it was a well-told depression story, I'm kind of just depressed because something I've looked forward to for so long has ended up disappointing me as much as it has. Now, depressed in hindsight might be a strong word to use. I'm not crying over it or wallowing in a puddle somewhere. I'm just really let down, and I'm sad that I'm let down. And I am more than entitled to feel that way. I'm happy for anyone that liked the expansion, I really am. I've loved 3 expansions that this game has given me. So I just didn't like this one. And it sucks that this one happens to be the conclusion that we've been building up to. And yes, I did like Stormblood, at least the parts in Doma. If I had to rank the expansions, I would say, from best to worst, and this is again just my personal opinion, Heavensward, Shadowbringers, the Doma parts of Stormblood, Endwalker, and then the Girabania parts of Stormblood. So again, I'm more than entitled to feel this way. I know that this community is fiercely defensive of this game, but just know that I am someone who loves this game as much as you do, and that's partially why I was so let down. So I guess I'll go into why. It's a long list, and I like to ramble, and I am not good at keeping things in chronological order or avoiding backtracking, so expect a lot of rambling, a lot of backtracking, and just bouncing all over the MSQ. I'm kind of just spitting things out as they come to me. And also, of course, spoiler alert, I would not expect anyone to click on this video if they have not played the MSQ. And if you get spoiled from any of this, well, that was your warning. The title was the warning, really, but anyway. So overall, I think my issue with Endwalker could be really boiled down to 2 things: a lack of momentum and a lack of stakes, with enough sort of cliched anime tropes and JRPG tropes that pushed it into just not being something that was my cup of tea. So with the stakes specifically, I just felt like the final days came and went, and if you were just an average Joe living in Old Charlayan, you would have not even noticed or even felt the effects of it at all. The role quests, I'm told, I haven't done them yet, but I'm told the role quests do kind of tackle how the rest of the world is dealing with the final days, which is great, that's exciting, but that should have been part of the MSQ. Instead, you only really see the final days take a toll on Thavnir, which is a new zone that we have no real attachment to. I don't care about any of the characters there, and it would have been nice to see the final days hit well-established locations that we as a player have grown to love for 10 years. I want to see maybe an instanced quest where you see Limsa Lominsa ravaged by the final days, an instant quest where the Central Shroud is on fire, an instant quest where the people of Ishgard trying to recover from the 1,000-Year War are now being faced with star showers raining down monsters upon them. But instead, we only see the effects in Thavnir, and that's it. The sky turns red in Old Charlayan for like a little bit, but you don't even see monsters spawn there. You don't even see them in Labyrinthos. It's just the sky turns red. And once the final days start, there's really no hustle in the characters to fix it. You take care of things in Radz-at-Han and Thavnir, but otherwise, you're just chilling. You go back to Old Charlayan, you find out what you're going to do to solve what's happening, and then the night before you actually go to work on the Ark, the Scions just hang out. There's a quest where you go meet, I forget if it's Alice or Y'shtola, but you go meet them at a cafe in Old Charlayan. I understand the trope of like the last respite before the final battle, but I just feel like doesn't really flow with this big of a threat. Like, this is a world-ending catastrophe. People are dying worldwide. Why are you guys getting coffee? You should be going to Limsa, not just hanging out. And I felt like we were going to get more of that when I saw the Endwalker first trailer, because it looked like they were fighting in Outer Lenosia or Upper Lenosia, I forget which. It looked like you were fighting there, but I guess they were fighting in Thavnir. So I really expected to see these monsters spawning all over the world, kind of like a World of Warcraft Cataclysm-like situation. But it wasn't. It was just Thavnir, and then we're hanging out with the Scions. So you get coffee or food or whatever at the cafe. All the Scions take turns telling you how much you mean to them. And then the next day, still no hustle. Instead, we're walking around Labyrinthos, showing the Loporrits everything about being a human. It's cute, I like the Loporrits, but this doesn't make sense at this juncture of the story. This is the climax. This is the part where the world is in imminent danger, and people we know and have protected for years are possibly being attacked somewhere, and we're showing Cooking Way how to farm. It just doesn't, it took me out of it. It made me feel like there were really no stakes. And that was really prevalent throughout Endwalker, but especially once the final days actually hit. Now, one other thing, this isn't really story related, but, well, I guess it is story related. There were really no lovable characters this expansion that I'm going to remember for years to come. I could rattle off so many lovable side characters from past expansions. Hilda from Heaven's Word, Magnai, Sadhu, and Sirena from Stormblood, Gosetsu, Hien, I mean, they were more main characters, but still, Feo Ul from Shadowbringers, Dulia Chai, Runar, Magnus, Kaishir, Reen. There were so many characters, Seto, Beklug, I think that's how you say his name, from Shadowbringers. But there were so many side characters that made an impression, and when you think of those expansions, part of you thinks of those characters. I don't think anyone was introduced in Endwalker that really gave me that feeling. What new named characters really were there? There was the sort of Cockney Lalafell engineer in Labyrinthos. Can't even tell you his name, because his entire little exposition scene was immediately commandeered by showing the Loporrits around. There was the Loporrits, I guess, but they're kind of all one character, and so they're not really that exciting. They're also a lot less charming than the Namazu. I will say that right out in the open. The Namazu were so much better than the Loporrits. But I really don't... Oh, there was Julius, but he's not someone I think people will remember. There was the male Viera that helps you the first time you're in Labyrinthos. Can't really think of his name. But these characters really didn't have enough time to grow and establish themselves as memorable side characters. They're just people we met. One character that I felt like got way too much attention in Endwalker was Moan Bryda. I understand she died, and I understand that the timeline of 14 does not necessarily match the timeline that we're experiencing IRL. Apparently, the entire plot of 14 from A Realm Reborn to now only encompasses 6 months, which I find crazy. But in real life, it's encompassed about 10 years. So Moan Bryda's death for us was 8 years ago. So for her to get this much focus, it's kind of like, who cares? And I'm sure some people, again, will say, oh, I care, I love Urianger, I love Moan Bryda. Cool, but we haven't seen her in 8 years, and she really wasn't that big of a character. She did like one thing, and then she died. And she was kind of brought in to die. So for her to get brought up as much as she did, and to the point that her parents showed up, but yet Papalymo's dad was relegated to a side quest that I didn't even know about until after I finished MSQ, despite him being a much more important character than Monbrida. I don't know, just a weird focus on a character that most people might not even remember, especially casual players. I'm just going to keep saying another thing I had an issue with, but another thing I had an issue with was the Amon reveal, because it was completely pointless. It did absolutely nothing for the world building, the character building. It was pointless. It served only to make the story more convoluted than it needed to be. If you cut out the revelation that Amon was Hermes, was Fandaniel, that they're all connected, does that do anything? If you cut Amon's mentions out entirely, does that really change Fandaniel, Hermes, their motivations? Does it really give you any type of insight into them? It may have if if Amon was more of a built-up character himself outside of the Encyclopedia Eorzea and some parts of the the Crystal Tower storyline, but otherwise, it really doesn't add anything. It was just wasted time, cutscenes that didn't need to be there, that ultimately, again, just made it more convoluted than it needed to be. And I think it added some depth padding to make things seem like they were deeper than they were, when really there was no complexity to it. It was just like an Easter egg, I guess. It was totally random, and I was not a fan of it at all. It also gave us a random cutscene with Xande, which I feel like kind of changed his characterization a little bit. Now, one of the more nitpicky issues I had was with the level 89 dungeon. When I first got to that dungeon, I thought it was such a cool idea, and I still think it was a cool idea, but I feel like they kind of rushed it a little bit, the idea, and I feel like if they had sat down, the devs, and really thought about how to script out that dungeon, they really could have made it so much more interesting and added so many more poetic matchups. Like, it was kind of random that one of the bosses in there was Ratatan, because he's dead, sure, so I guess he belongs there. But does anyone care about Ratatan? Has anyone ever cared about Ratatan? He was just a Garlean that we killed in Cape Westwind. Didn't really have much of a personality. He died again like 10 years ago. If the whole dungeon had been a Realm Reborn enemies, sure, put him in. But they had enemies from all expansions, except Shadowbringers. So it just seemed really random to have him. And it was also kind of random that only one of the trash pulls was a named enemy. The first trash pull, or the final pull before the first boss, was Ilberd, but then none of the other trash pulls end up being enemies. I kind of wrote this down, but I think trash pull 1 should have ended with Ratatan, and then the boss be Livia. Then maybe Monbrida's ghost helps us out, kind of similar to how Shiva helps with the last boss. Then Trash Pull 2 ends with the Knights of the Round, and Hoshifan helps, kind of getting his revenge. Then Boss 2 is Ilberd, and Papalymo's ghost helps. And then maybe Trash Pull 3 could include Yotsuyu, so she can get maybe a final redemption. And then the final boss, I guess you can leave as is, with Amon and Shiva helping. I just feel like that would have been such a spectacle to have all of that in one dungeon, and it really would have celebrated fallen villains and the heroes that fell helping us get there. But instead, it's a random Ilberd cameo, no Papalymo at all. Or I guess it could have been Papalymo at the start, but I thought it was Louisoix. They didn't really make it very clear. Or if they did, I wasn't paying attention because it was pretty late. I'll have to go back. And I fully am ready to eat these words if that was explicitly said to be Papalymo. But regardless, I digress. They should have kind of moved things around just to make it more poetic, more of a spectacle, more of a moment. Now, on the subject of cameos, there were some random cameos in this expansion that just kept coming back over and over again, to the point that I had to wonder is Square Enix just cheaping out and just bringing back the same voice actors over and over again? Because, again, being the expansion that ends this 10-year-long story, I wanted to see everyone. I wanted everyone to get a moment. But instead, the same people kept showing up, and they weren't even people who were ever super important. I have totally paid attention to the MSQ for years since I've started, but I didn't remember who Sicard was. I had to look him up, and he shows up so much. Him and Amanalane keep showing up over and over again, and yet, on the same token of them being random cameos, other characters are just inexplicably missing. And again, I've heard they show up in the role quests, but they shouldn't have been relegated to the role quests. Characters like Sicard and Amanalane, small characters, should have been relegated to the role quests. Like, Hien, Yugiri, and Gosetsu were such major fixtures in Stormblood, and none of them show up at any point in the MSQ. That it's just nonsensical that they wouldn't show up at all. These are important characters, and they're just not there, and instead we get Sicard and Amanalane bickering for the 10th time. I really do think, again, that they just cheaped out on the voice actors, and Sicard's voice actor was cheaper, and they were like, oh, come on, we need you for another scene, we'll write Sicard into this. And who even cares about Sicard? Who did the devs think they were pleasing having Sicard show up this many times? I know I'm going on and on about Sicard, but and other characters that were missing that would have been nice to see as this finale. It would have been nice to see Gabu. It would have been nice to see Mother Miyun batter on Ten Fingers again. The Adventurers Guild people from the first 3 main cities. But no, we just got Sicard again and again and again. Now, I guess the rest of my issues are mostly the very, very end of the game. So, an additional spoiler warning, I guess. But Elpis is, I think, the moment when I realized that maybe this expansion just wasn't for me. I'm totally fine with time travel to an extent. I do not think it was handled well this time. I think Elpis should not be a map zone that we can freely go to and from. Elpis should have just been a instanced fight, and then a cutscene, and then another instanced fight, and then another cutscene. And these cutscenes should have not had the Warrior of Light be so involved with the story. They really could have just been the Warrior of Light observing as the tiny, sort of almost invisible version of themselves. They did not need the Warrior of Light to be turned normal size, talking with Emet-Selch, talking with Vana. This is where it became very JRPG-y in a bad way. And when you go there, you're specifically told by Elidibus, do not say anything, do not interfere. And then as soon as you're pressured in Elpis, when they're like, tell us where you really came from, immediately the Warrior of Light's like, oh, well, the world's ending, you made a fake Amarat in the Tempest, you guys are going to summon Zodiark and fuck up everything, and then Heidelin's going to wreck your ass. Like, that didn't need to happen. They could have just had the Warrior of Light exist as an observer, have an instanced fight where you get to maybe play as Emet-Selch, have another cutscene, and then another instanced fight where maybe you play as Vana. You didn't have to go through all these filler quests, learning about Hermes, learning about Medion, but I guess Medion had to be the MacGuffin. So they had to build her up somehow because, after 10 years, of course, the main threat is something we've never heard about until halfway through the final expansion. Which, that in itself is a storytelling issue, but whatever. It just felt like a disservice to have the Warrior of Light participate because it makes the storytelling really lazy. Because it makes it so they don't have to find creative ways to spell things out. Instead, they can just treat it as though it's a current event and spell it out in the most plain of words. And I think as soon as I realized that, really, once Emet-Selch noticed the Warrior of Light tiny and faint and brought you up to their size, that's when it kind of ruined it for me. That's when I realized, oh, this expansion's just not for me. And, I don't know. I'm talking in circles, but my point is, I do not think Elpis should have been a zone. I think the time travel was sloppy. I think us still being able to go back and forth to Elpis doesn't really feel right. It kind of feels like it cheapens the mystery and the mystique of the Ancients. Instead, it's like, we could just go there and hang out, do a hunt train, do some Fates, apparently do Pandemonium, because it's apparently going to be there based on the post-credit scene. It really just ruined the mystery and the mystique of the Ancients. I think that is the best way I could describe my feelings towards it. And on the subject of Medion, her writing was so inconsistent. I didn't mind her. I thought she was kind of annoying, but I get the feeling she was meant to be written that way. But when she first turns evil, which is cool, that's neat, I'm into it. I still don't know about her being the MacGuffin, but her turn to being a villain is really just based on apathy and her genuinely thinking that ending life is a good thing. And she does it because she cares for the people of Aetheris. It's not out of any malice. She genuinely cares for the people of Aetheris, and she's doing this as a kindness. But then, when you get to the final zone, she's totally different. She is suddenly talking, like, mean? It's really inconsistent, but she kind of became mean-spirited. There is a quote in the final zone, I think it's after Estinian sacrifices himself, or maybe it's at the end when everyone has sacrificed themselves, but Medion says, verbatim, "I can't unmake you yet because your friends are protecting you. So until they fade away, I'll satisfy myself with watching you try and fail to find a way out of this place." I'll satisfy myself watching you fail? That is so mean. And you know, people could be meaner, I could be meaner, but it's not Medion's character to be mean like that. It's kind of like that whole line is her being like, "Yeah, bitch, I'm gonna watch you squirm, you piece of garbage, I'm gonna rub your nose in it, yeah." But that's not her. She genuinely thinks she's doing a kindness for the people of Aetheris. So why is she now, like, reveling in our squirming? It's just inconsistent. And I think it was meant to make her more villainous, because she's the big bad now. Now, also in the final zone, and this is an issue I've had probably since Shadowbringers, enough of the fake out deaths. Just enough of them. I mean, there are just too many. Especially for Y'shtola. Y'shtola has had a fake out death every single expansion, or near-death experience. In Heavensward, we think she's likely dead at first, and then only towards the end do we revive her. In Stormblood, very early on, she gets a very nasty blow from Xenos, and is incapacitated for a little while. In Shadowbringers, before the Katana Revel in the Raktika Greatwood, she quote-unquote sacrifices herself and dies, and Emet-Selch clicks his fingers and she comes back. And then this expansion, she sacrifices herself in Ultima Thule, and surprise, she's alive again. It's gotten to the point where anytime she sacrifices herself, you can rest assured it's not real. So this is what I meant earlier again with, where are the stakes? There are no stakes. When characters just constantly get brought back to life. When is the last time a character has died that was a hero and truly stayed dead? I'm trying to think myself, and I think it might be Papa Limo? I really can't think of any heroes that died in Stormblood or Shadowbringers, and I'm not saying heroes have to die. You know, I'm not trying to be edgy and say I want more death, but I want some stakes. I want some believability. I want to feel like someone could die. You know, I want to be on the edge of my seat. So in the final zone, when Thancred sacrificed himself, I thought it might be genuine. I was like, oh, okay, wow. Part of me was a little bit like, he'd have a bigger scene if a character that's been around this long really died. Then Estinian sacrificed himself, and I still thought maybe. I could believe them killing off 2 characters. But then the next scene, Y'shtola and Urianger died. Discounting completely that it was Y'shtola, there was no way they were killing off 4 characters. And at this point, the rest of the zone was already predicted in my head. At this point, I realized, okay, this whole zone's formulaic and predictable. I now know, obviously next, Grahatia is going to sacrifice himself. And then obviously after that, the twins are going to sacrifice themselves. And then at the end, I know they're not going to kill off all the characters, so of course they're all going to come back. And I just know this as someone who's played any video game. So obviously I know they're all going to come back, and I wouldn't even believe all but one would come back, because that would be so random. Why would they bring everyone back except one person when they all died under the same circumstances? So again, once you get to the second Aetheryte and Y'shtola and Urianger die, the whole rest of the zone is just formulaic and predictable and boring and has no stakes, because I know everyone's coming back, and I know everyone's going to die, or everyone's going to die, and I know everyone's going to come back. So at that point, it's just, okay, final march to Medion, because obviously Medion's the final boss. This character that I don't care about, who I just met 2 days ago in the MSQ. So, on the same vein of the lack of stakes, we have Emet-Selch and Hythlodaeus, is that how you say his name? When they come back at the end. I know they're not really alive again, I know it's just kind of, they got to come back for a second, but really, are there any stakes at all? Can't someone just die and stay dead? Did they have to show us Emet-Selch's reaction to remembering everything? Because in death, Hermes' spell was broken and he remembers stuff. But did they have to show us? Can't we just know, like, in our hearts, Emet-Selch in the afterlife right now realizes everything that happened, and he must be kicking himself? Like, can't they just leave it for us to know? But instead they have to spell it out right in front of our faces, because they don't think we're adults who can kind of perceive how things would go. So of course they're brought back, and we get to see Emet-Selch be annoyed that he was tricked by Hermes, and 100%, I really think they're going to get brought back again in the future. But the only reason these characters are repeatedly brought back is because they're fan favorites. And it's the same reason that I believe Grahatia is even still around. He should have died at the end of 5.3. That was an amazing scene. It was amazing just for him to die, and it was emotional, but then he was brought back in the same patch. And people say, oh, well, you know, he's alive, but he can't go back to the first. So the goodbye he gave to Lena and all his friends on the first is still very heartfelt. Okay, maybe, but he has a friend, the Warrior of Light, who can still travel back and forth and deliver messages. Like, take my grandmom, for example. She's passed away, and I have to live with the finality of it. But if I knew someone who could travel back and forth and deliver messages to and from, I would be a lot happier. It would definitely not feel as grave or as significant. So it's almost more like Grahatia just caught a bus somewhere and forgot to get a round-trip ticket. And that's the same type of finality that I missed in Grahatia's death that I missed with Emet-Selch. His final death at the end of Shadowbringers was so amazing. It was so well written, the whole build-up, and then at the end for him to say, remember we existed? Well, of course we're going to remember you exist now, because we got to see you 10 more times. We got to go to your home in Elpis. We got to meet you in your full form. Of course we're going to remember you existed. We can go back anytime we want now. And it's not like it's not canon. I mean, Hunt Trains aren't canon, but Pandemonium is canon. So in the canon, we can travel back to Elpis whenever we want and see Emet-Selch theoretically whenever we want. So there's no finality in his death at all. And Endwalker trounced what Shadowbringers did in creating a great death for a great character. And also with Emmett, he is a consolable villain, which is part of the great writing of Shadowbringers. You can see how in his mind the end justifies the means. And by that same account, how were you in his shoes, you might even do the same thing if it were your people that you were trying to bring back. That's something we can appreciate as players of the game. But they're kind of making him consolable to the characters in 14, if that makes sense. Like, we can look at Emmett fondly, but it doesn't make sense to me that all the other characters are now looking at him fondly. Like, yeah, he helped fight Medion at the end, but you know what else he also did? Helped bring about the destruction of billions of people's lives on the other shards that they successfully destroyed. Like, is that okay in this universe? Sure, he helped save the world, but they just ignore the fact that he still is responsible for killing millions of people on the Source and billions of people on the Fallen shards. So yes, he's consolable and sympathetic to an extent, but when the characters look on him fondly, like when he disappears finally at the end before you fight Medion, the characters are like, wow, what a great guy. Not really in your universe. He, like I said, had sympathetic goals in mind, but that's the beauty of it. You shouldn't also ignore the fact as an in-game or an in-universe character that he killed millions and billions of people to get there. Now, another issue I had, again, I'm sorry I keep saying another issue, but that's the only segue I have, was Xenos' death. Such an anime cheeseball moment. It was a cool fight visually, the music was good, but it was so cheesy, y'all. He got exactly what he wanted. He got to fight the Warrior of Light at the end. And sidebar, there is no way at all that they would give him the Mother Crystal. If the Warrior of Light if they actually hadn't heard from the Warrior of Light, I think they would have instead used the remainder of the Mother Crystal to try and bring people up to the moon. They would not be like, oh, Xenos? The madman? Sure, take the Mother Crystal, fly to the end of space, go ahead. I do not think Cryo would do that, and I don't think the Forum would allow that to happen. As much as they thought the Scions were warmongering, we're expected to believe they're giving the last bit of strength of the Mother Crystal to Xenos? Absolutely not. That was just a really lazily written way to get Xenos to the end of the world. They could have had him get there by so many different ways. But anyway, the fight with him, it was lame. It was cheesy to me. I'm sorry, I just thought it was really cheesy. I think a better death for Xenos would have been... So, Julius, the blue-haired guy, who confronts Xenos and Garlemald, and he's like, what the hell, man? Like, you were meant to be our leader. You were meant to stabilize our country, and you have basically sacrificed us all to doom, and you've ruined our whole civilization just because of your obsession with the Warrior of Light. And Xenos is like, I don't even know who you are, and just like walks away. Basically just spat in Julius's face, like, oh, I took everything from you? I don't even know who you are. It's very Thanos. But I think then a great end to Xenos would have been maybe in a post-credit scene or a mid-credit scene. Xenos is walking around the ruins of Garlemald, maybe aimless, trying to figure out what he can do to make the Warrior of Light fight him. Julius shows up, challenges him to a fight. Xenos is like, you're not even worth my time. I only care about the Warrior of Light. And then, in an unexpected moment, Julius actually slays Xenos. This unnamed swordsman who Xenos took everything from, and who Xenos doesn't even know, who Xenos doesn't even respect, and is too blinded by his respect of the Warrior of Light. This unnamed swordsman kills Xenos. That would have been such good writing. It would have been poetic in a way. It would have really just been a spit in Xenos' face. Like, look at how deluded you were. But instead, Xenos gets his big boy anime battle with the Warrior of Light. Wow. He gets to fight the Warrior of Light at the end of the world. And then they punch each other. They get into a fisticuffs match because they're so worn out and fatigued. Like, really? It's too anime for me. And I know it's a JRPG, so I should expect these tropes, but 14 has done a good job at staying away from them for the most part. And maybe other people wouldn't be into Julius killing Xenos. I just think it would have been unexpected. And unexpected in a way that worked. Not unexpected in a way where, you know, Empath Garuda ends up being the MacGuffin. And I think that's pretty much most of my issues. Now, I know I compared this expansion to Shadowbringers a lot, and I'm sure people are going to start calling Endwalker haters, for lack of a better term, Shadowbringers fanboys, but I assure you, I was not a huge fan of Shadowbringers when it first came out. Truthfully, I didn't actually like Shadowbringers for most of it. I thought it was super, super formulaic. The formula of Shadowbringers was basically go to a zone, kill the Light Warden, go back to the Crystarium, go to the Ocular and meet the Crystal Exarch, go to the inn, have a scene with Ardbert, rinse, repeat. It was always Light Warden, Crystal Exarch, Ardbert. And you constantly went from the Crystarium to a zone, back to the Crystarium. So it's like from a base to a zone, back to home base. And that's partially why I didn't like Shadowbringers and why I preferred Heavensward. Because in Heavensward, you are on one long journey. You start in Ishgard, and then each zone flows from one zone to the next, so you feel like it's actually a pilgrimage, and I just think I like those sorts of stories more. But when you got to the end of Shadowbringers is when I realized, oh, this is really good. And maybe I'll end up looking back on Endwalker fondly. I might do a New Game Plus someday. I just don't know, because with Shadowbringers, by the end of it, I realized, oh, this is the ticket. This is it. But for Endwalker, I only really felt any real bit of satisfaction during Garlemald. I thought that section was really well written, and it felt tense, and it felt like there were actual stakes. And that was the first zone where the story really picked up, because it takes a while to get started. At the beginning, I felt like the Labyrinthos and Thavnir sections just go on for so long. So once you finally get to Garlemald, it really felt like stuff was happening, and like there was some drama, some actual drama. Oh, actually, one more complaint. After Garlemald, you go to the moon. That was a miss for me. I think the moon came way too early and way too little happened there. You really don't even use the map. You only use where the Loporrits are and like the part where you fight Zodiark. The first Aetheryte, you're there for maybe half an hour of gameplay, and the rest of the moon, you're not there at all. Such another missed opportunity on the moon. There is a crashed Allagan ship on the moon. I'm looking at the map now, I'm in game. And I think the zone is Heimdall's last sight or something. And that's a crashed Allagan ship. So when you need the resources from Dalamud, that would have been an easy opportunity to send you back up to the moon. Oh, we need stuff from Allagan ships? Oh, there's a crashed Allagan ship on the moon. MSQ, send us back up there. Let's use more of this map. But no. Instead, you go to the cafe with the Scions and you show Cooking Way how to farm. Just nonsensical stuff that they missed. Stuff that they missed where I'm almost like, were you guys even paying attention to your own game? And that's super nitpicky. Like, I didn't need to go back to the moon for that. I just think in general the moon should have felt like more of an event. Like, even when you go to the moon, it never felt like any of the characters were like, holy shit, we're on the moon. It was just like, oh, we're here. And then within half an hour of being on the moon, you're fighting Zodiark. I almost feel like you should have gone to the moon, then met the Loporrits, and then fought Zodiark. So at least Zodiark was the big finish to this iconic zone. Instead, what's the iconic finish to the iconic zone? The moon, in all of the marketing of Endwalker, what's the big finish on the moon? Meeting the Loporrits. That's it. That's the big finish, is helping the Loporrits and then peacefully going, or fighting the Loporrits at the end, but they're like a joke fight. You fight like 5 of them, and then you just go back to Atheris. That was the moon. Like, it just didn't fit the way it felt like it would. And maybe they could have even cut out the final zone. I did like the final zone, but maybe you go there, go through it all, and Meteon teleports away. And you went all the way to the end of the universe to find her, and then she goes to the moon, and from the moon she's going to destroy Atheris. So you have to go back to the moon to fight her, or something. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that myself. I'm just spitballing here. I just think the moon should have been a bigger factor into anything, instead of just, that's where Zodiark is. And on the subject of Zodiark, and again, I know I keep backtracking, but I'm kind of going off the cuff here, just speaking as the thoughts come to me, there was a lot of retconning. Like, I could have sworn in Shadowbringers they said that that Vina or Hydaelyn destroyed Zodiark, which I guess she kind of did, but I never interpreted it as, oh, she bound him and she bound his pieces. I just didn't interpret it that way. And then there was some stuff that I feel like they never touched again. Like, do you remember, I forget if it was the 81 dungeon or 83, but there was an arm in that tower, or an arm that was used as an energy source, and then they just never really addressed that again. It's kind of random. But anyway, I think that is probably all of my thoughts, and I'm sure as soon as I finish this video I'm going to think of more things I didn't like. And there's things I didn't like that aren't story related. Like, I thought the music was overall kind of weak, and I understand Soken was sick, so I'm not going to make a whole thing out of that. But I do feel like there weren't any tracks, aside from the Endwalker theme, which plays in the final zone, there aren't really any tracks that I'm going to come back to over and over again. And in fact, they repeated a lot of tracks, like Labyrinthos. A lot of the music there is like from past dungeons and areas. But there wasn't like a Lahi or a theme that's as good as the Amarang Day theme. But anyway, again, I'm not really going to harp on that because I understand Soken was sick. But regardless of the reasoning, it was still something that I found lacking in this expansion. So that is all the thoughts I have for now on it. The TLDR really is, the stakes felt fabricated and that the momentum was not there. So I will end with that. Feel free to sound off below. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Tell me if you think I'm right. I do like discussing things, so I probably will respond to everyone. But please don't give me hate for my opinions. I'm more than ready to receive it. If any of the more Cuckoo Bananas fans of FF14 happen to see this video. But these are just my opinions as someone who's played for a while and was very disappointed by the MSQ. Hopefully the new story starts off with a bang, and I really like it because I want to be happy with everything this game puts out. Because the game as a whole does make me happy. Alright, that's all. Goodbye.